Hey guys, I'm doing a video on how to make the boo-boo bags that I am going to start loading onto the website. This particular one is the robot. So I wanted to quickly go over the materials that you would need for this particular bag. I'm going to do him in a gray polka dot. So you will need two single pieces, so it doesn't have to be folded over, of whatever the face is going to be in a 5x7 or whatever hoop size that you're doing. Okay, and then the other pieces, and now this is for the 5x7, so I'll probably make it for the bigger and smaller hoop as well, so just keep that in mind. And then you will need another piece. This one is a 6x6 piece that I have folded over and ironed so that I have a nice edge there, but this is a 6x6 piece still in that same polka dotted fabric. And then I have another piece that is about a 7.5 by an 8.5 inch piece, folded in half again and ironed to get that crisp line. Now the only other two pieces on this particular bag you're going to need is, this is where your scraps come in handy, is these are about 3x3 or 2.5 by 2.5 or so. So that's about roughly the estimate on what size these pieces are. So you'll need two pieces if you're going to do two different colors for the side knobs of the robot. So that's what these pieces are here. So that's all the materials that you'll need. You'll also need to have your hoop ready to go with a medium weight stabilizer, and we'll get started. Alright, so the first thing I went ahead and did is step one, which is the complete outline of what the pattern is going to look like, including the knobs on the side. This is to give you a reference point. On this particular bag, we are going to lay down whatever our face fabric or whatever his middle fabric is going to be, and it needs to cover up all of those stitches. So don't just try to cover up that center square piece. We want to cover up where the knobs are going to go as well, and then we're going to run the next stitch, which is going to be our tack down stitch for this center piece. Okay, so I went ahead and stitched that around the center part, and then I went forward and stitched the placement stitching for the outside knobs of this robot guy. You want to make sure you just keep your fabric down. Don't trim around this. This needs to be, it needs to stay there. So I'm taking my first color pieces here. I cut that 3x3 piece in half and go ahead and lay it over top and stitch out the top, which is going to be a satin stitch on these. Okay, I got these two pieces done, and I went ahead and did placement stitching for the inside knobs, and I'm going to go ahead and lay those pieces down, stitch tack down, trim around, and then go ahead and stitch the satin stitch. Okay, so we went ahead and did satin stitch around the other knobs, and now it's going to stitch out the placement stitching for the whites of the eyes. So we're going to stick that back on the machine. And I actually forgot to mention this piece here whenever I was doing the materials, but you can use felt or fleece on this. I just don't have white or ivory right now, so I'm using kind of like an off-white piece of cloth, but it's really super thin and I don't want to see that gray through there, so I just doubled it up so that's a little bit thicker and you can't see the gray. But you can pretty much use whatever you want on the eyes. I just like to use something a little softer since it is going to be used you know, for an ouch pouch or a boo-boo bag. So going to go ahead and stitch placement stitching on the eyes. Alrighty, so I did the tack down for the eyes. I went ahead and snipped around. It's going to, instead of doing the satin stitch now, I had it go ahead and do the black part of the middle of the eyes, the mouth, and I'm going to move forward and do the tops here in black as well, but I did make that a different color in case you wanted to change the top circles. And then it'll come back to white. That way it catches up underneath the black part of the eye and that's not sticking out. So that's why I did it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and run my black stitches and then my white satin stitch around the eyeball, and then we will come back to the next step. Alrighty, so I ran all of the black steps here and then I went around the eyes again with the white. And now my final step before putting on the back and front fabric piece is going to just stitch a satin stitch around the square piece of our robot. So I'm going to stick that back on. Whatever color you need to do the outline stitch, it's just going to go around this center part here, but we're still not putting any of the backing fabric on yet. So run that stitch first. Alrighty, so we got all the front stitching done now, and we are flipping our hoop over. I'm going to use a little 505 spray. You can also use tape or pin these down, but I would just recommend just doing a little spray. And that one layered piece that we had cut, just like the front, we are going to put it face up, so right side up, on the back of your machine. Okay, so flipping the hoop over, I'm taking that smaller we folded the wrong sides together piece, ironed it so you got a nice crisp edge. With any of the designs that have something like coming out on the sides, I would recommend doing the top piece smaller than the bottom piece. So I'm laying this piece down but not coming into this part of the design, because whenever you want to stick your heating pack inside of here, it's a little bit easier if it doesn't have to go over this. So I'm just going just above that with that piece, making sure it covers, and then I'm taking my bigger piece and I want to make sure it does cover up these side pieces, because it will be stitching, and then, you know, making sure it kind of lines up straight, and it will be coming over this piece by about, I don't know, an inch, inch and a half here. So you want it to have a little bit of overlap here, because we don't want the pouch to come out easily. So inch, inch and a half overlap here without going outside of the design, of the top of the design. Okay, if that makes sense. So now I'm going to run my final stitch, which is a bean stitch around the entire design. So we have 3 pieces of fabric we just added, this piece, and the piece on the back of the hoop. So we're going to run that final stitching. Alright, so it's stitched all the way around. You can see I have my little pocketed area here, stitched all the way around here. I did make these more square, that way you can do little notch cuts here to get a little bit more push out on those elements. And then this is the other side, so just give a quick look before you pop it off the hoop and make sure you didn't accidentally miss a piece, since we were adding 3 pieces of fabric to that particular step. So I'm going to take it off my hoop now and just cut around, giving myself a little bit of fabric on the outside. Don't cut too close where you're going to cut your stitches out. Okay, so I got them all cut out, and I just want to show you here on these little pieces, I cut like a notch here, and then I just did an angled cut versus cutting into here, and it'll allow you to use something to kind of poke into that square a little bit better, just so that it's more of a squared piece whenever you turn it inside out. So where this little pocket hole is where we're going to turn the entire design inside out, and then I will show you what that looks like. Alright, so here he is all turned inside out. I actually, to get into these nooks really well, I actually use a flat-headed screwdriver. So just don't push really hard into these corners, but that's what I use to kind of get into some really tight spaces. But you'll see now why we left that you know, beginning fabric there, because you will see a little bit of it. I get it pretty close to the satin stitch, but there's a little bit of overage just so it won't hit the stitching when you flip it inside out. And then this side has the flapped part, so enough to put your bag inside. And then also, since we put the fabric on the back side of the hoop, you can't see any of the raw stitches on the back, which is good. So now we have our pouch, and then also in your file is going to be the, it's a slightly smaller, in this particular case, square that we're going to stitch out on the machine, and then you would fill that with whatever material you're going to fill your ouch pouch with. So this is this step, and then I'm going to move on and show you how to do the insides. Okay, so now we're moving on to the next file. That's with our boo-boo bags. The first stitching is going to be your placement stitching, which is going to be the same shape as whatever bag you have, the inside portion of it, and it's going to leave a little notch tab. So you do need to make sure that both your front and your back piece cover this notch. So I'm going to go ahead, and it doesn't really matter what material you use here, because it's going to be on the inside of the bag, so you're not going to be able to see it. So you can have it match if you want. This is just a piece of scrap that I had, so this covers up that notch, and I'm going to go ahead and run my stitching, which is going to stitch this piece down first. So just one piece at a time here. Okay, so it's stitched that piece out, again adding the notch, and now I'm going to lay right sides together. In this particular case it doesn't really matter because it's all the same color, but if you had a printed fabric you want right sides together because this will be turned inside out. So we're going to lay right sides together on the top of the hoop, and then we're going to run the final stitching, which is going to be that same exact shape, but it's going to leave that notch unsewn. Okay. All right, so here's the finished stitching. It did a bean stitch around it to make sure that it's secure. So you are going to want to take this off of your hoop, and then I am going to cut from the back side forward because you want to cut this notch out. So you don't want to cut from your front piece where you can't see the notch and cut straight across. So I'm going to cut from the back side of where the stabilizer is and cut all the way around. Okay, got them all the way cut out, and now I'm going to, so the one side has the stabilizer, that's fine, you can keep that on there, it doesn't matter. But you're going to flip it inside out in between the two pieces of fabric. So go ahead and turn this piece inside out. All right, all flipped inside out, and then I went ahead and took my notches and tucked them inside and ironed this flat so that I kind of know where my stitch up needs to be, and that once I start filling it up, I don't get it too full to where I can't get my machine up under here to stitch this. So do that, and then I'm gonna get a funnel. I have a funnel, but you don't necessarily have to have one. You could scoop it in with a small measuring cup or whatever, but you would want to put either your funnel in here and then fill this up with rice, or you can also do dried corn. It has to be already dried corn, so like from a feed store. Those are really good to be warmed up or put in the refrigerator or the freezer and get cold as well. So after you fill this up, you can either hand stitch here, or I'm just going to run a little stitch from my machine here, or there's also like a tape, like a fusible tape you can put here. Just make sure that it's not going to mess up or compromise your fabric once it gets hot. But once we're done, we're going to take our pouch and tuck it inside of here, and I'll show you that once it's complete. And then you have got yourself a boo-boo bag, and it's ready to be used. Okay, so I filled my bag up. I just had some white rice, so that's what I put in my bag, but I did want to show you that I left, you know, about this much at the top so that I was able to run my stitching underneath my machine, and I got it, you know, as close to the edge as I could. I don't personally care about it because it's for my kids, and so the appearance wasn't a big deal for me, but you can also use that tape if you are doing it professionally for selling. But when laid flat, it's, you know, probably about an inch, inch and a half thick. And now I'm going to tuck it inside of here, and it will be complete. He is ready to be warmed up, either in the microwave, and these only take like 30 to 45 seconds to warm up, or you can freeze them too. And I would just, if you're gonna freeze it, I would probably just freeze the rice pack. Just make sure you lay it flat in your freezer, because it will be more difficult to stick it in here if it's bunched up in a ball. But if you're gonna just heat them up, I would just leave it in here, and then you can throw this whole thing in the microwave, and they are great. They're about the size of, you know, your hand, so they're good for, you know, little boo-boos. Also, the bonus file that you will get with this will just basically not have that final stitch out, and you can use it as an applique if you want to. So instead of doing the first step where we lay down our gray and we don't cut out around these notches, the only difference would be you would cut out around the notches to use it as an applique, like on a shirt or whatever you want to use them on. So that's a bonus file. These would also be cute like for beanbag toss or games or whatever too. I didn't think of that until I put my rice in there. But anyway, so it kind of doubles as an ouch pouch and a applique if you wanted to put the actual design on a shirt or something like that. So thanks for watching and have fun.